Our nation has 4 founding documents. In 1774, a sweeping boycott of British goods, dubbed the Continental Association. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence. The Articles of Confederation, drafted in 1777 and ratified in 1781. And finally, in 1787, the United States Constitution. Pop quiz. Which of our founders signed all 4 documents? Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, George Washington, or was it James Madison? Answer: none of the above. The only founder to sign all 4 was Roger Sherman from Connecticut. And he not only signed them, he also served on the committees that drafted them. I'll bet you've never heard of Roger Sherman. That's understandable. He never became president, or died in a duel, or starred in a hit musical. While most of the delegates to the Constitutional Convention were wealthy merchants or large landowners, Roger Sherman was a lowly cobbler, mending worn-out shoes. But self-taught, this cobbler passed the bar exam, and once qualified, he served as a justice on the Connecticut Superior Court for 2 decades. Sherman is simply different from the rest. Here's how Georgia delegate William Pierce describes him. Mr. Sherman exhibits the oddest-shaped character I ever remember to have met with. He is awkward and unnecessarily strange in his manner. But in his train of thinking there is something regular, deep, and comprehensive. Yet the oddity of his address, the vulgarism that accompany his public speaking, and that strange New England cant which runs through his public as well as his private speaking, make everything that is connected with him grotesque and laughable. And yet he deserves infinite praise. No man has a better heart or a clearer head. Sherman served in every session of Congress from the outset, the First Continental Congress in 1774. It is now June of 1787. For the past 13 years, Congress has been the sole governing body of our infant nation. At this juncture, Sherman, like his fellow delegates at the Constitutional Convention, understands the need to strengthen and broaden the national government by adding an executive branch. Perhaps an executive council, or even a single person. Yet Congress, in his mind, must remain primary. The executive is nothing more than an institution for carrying the will of the legislature into effect. The person or persons ought to be appointed by and accountable to the legislature only, which is the depository of the supreme will of society. If James Madison is the so-called father of the Constitution, Roger Sherman is father of Congress. Sherman is a workhorse. He serves on all the major committees. At every turn, he leaves his stamp on the proceedings. Delegates from large states like Virginia, looking for ways to increase the influence of their constituents, argue that representation in Congress should be determined by population. But delegates from small states like Delaware insist on equal representation for every state, no matter its size. The mood gets ugly. The convention is on the verge of falling apart. But Roger Sherman, a cobbler who mends broken shoes, cobbles together a deal that saves the Constitution. In the House of Representatives, the number of members will be awarded according to their respective numbers. Large states win that one. But the Senate shall be composed of 2 senators from each state. Now small states in turn will win. Nobody gets it all, but everybody gets something. It's a workable compromise. But Sherman does not like the convention's other major compromise, which counts each slave as 3/5 of a person when determining representation in the House. Even so, along with other delegates from New England, Sherman just swallows it. The Union must be preserved, a fundamental, overarching goal. Next up, and most important, what does the Constitution empower Congress to do? Again, Roger Sherman makes his move. He's bold and clear. The Confederation has not given sufficient powers to Congress. Additional powers are necessary, particularly that of raising money, which will involve many other powers. Although you might not like this, the first and most important power granted to Congress is the power of taxation. Any nation needs money. How else could you fight a Revolutionary War, for instance, as we did? Years earlier, colonists had cried out, "No taxation without representation." So henceforth, Americans will only be taxed with representation by the people they themselves have elected to Congress. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. Impost, that's another word for tariff. The founders granted Congress the power to levy imposts or tariffs. To make the economy function smoothly, Congress can coin money and borrow money on the credit of the United States. Congress is empowered to regulate commerce with foreign nations and within the several states. Americans ever since have tussled over this so-called Interstate Commerce Clause. How deeply does it reach? In 1964, Congress prohibited racial discrimination in public accommodations, hotels, restaurants, and so forth. Segregationists in the South argued that a local cafe was not involved in interstate commerce, so Congress did not have the authority to regulate this local business. But if some hungry traveler from another state just happens to drop by for a hamburger, isn't that interstate commerce? Critically, Congress is empowered to declare war, raise and support armies, and provide and maintain a navy. The list goes on. Congress is expected to establish post offices and post roads, and promote the progress of science and useful arts with copyright laws. These are not frills. They help shape a free society. Today, some provisions no longer seem relevant, like the power to define and punish piracies committed on the high seas. But here's one that is still relevant. Congress, not the president, has the power to establish a uniform rule of naturalization. That is, who can become a citizen and how. That's clearly the business of Congress, which makes the foundational laws of the land. And what can be more foundational than who can become a citizen and how? A personal note. Here's my Grandpa Morris's naturalization paper from 1888. Finally, the framers empower Congress to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. That's the so-called elastic clause, hotly debated ever since. Just how elastic should that clause be? These days, is Congress stretching the limits of authority? Or is Congress not living up to its responsibilities? Feel free to weigh in below. We have lived by this Constitution for 237 years. It's the oldest living Constitution in the entire world, and it has done its job. Will it continue to do so?